we talk about in this business who the future of our health movement has been. And this man, Dr. Nathan Gershfeld, in my book, is the future of our health movement. After having a life-changing experience, Dr. Gershfeld changed careers from an electrical engineer to a chiropractor. That led him down the road path of health promotion through healthy living, where he had experienced tremendous results as a patient at the True North Health Center. Dr. Gershfeld then became a staff doctor at True North from 2011 to 2014, where while supervising fasting patients, lecturing on health and wellness, and maintaining a private practice, he earned his professional certification by the International Association of Hygienic Physicians. He currently serves on the board of the True North Health Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to research in the areas of health promotion, medically supervised water-only fasting. His philosophy of healthcare is based on two principles: logic and simplicity. Because of his approach emphasizes addressing the underlying causes of disease or discomfort, of coming up with a strategy of prevention, treatment, and reversal of disease. A dedicated enthusiast of healthful living for over 15 years, Dr. Gershfeld runs the Fasting Escape Retreat Center in Yorba Linda, where he is committed to helping his patients become their own best physicians. He is an amazing guy. Wanda and I had the privilege back in March, right as COVID was kind of allowing people to travel, that we went and spent about a week with Dr. Furman at his beautiful retreat, and then we just drove up the coast and visited Dr. Gershfeld's. And when you're at Dr. Gershfeld's retreat center, you live like a king. It is the facility. I guess if you had to fast and water fast, and do it in luxury, that's the best way I could describe Dr. Gershfeld's site. It's one-on-one care. It's the same kind of world-class care that you get at True North. It is really a privilege to introduce my friend and the future of the National Health Association and the health movement that we so espouse, Dr. Nathan Gershfeld.
All right, how's everybody doing today? All right, thank you, Mark Huberman. Thank you, Wanda Huberman. Thanks to Michelle for the online support as well. You guys ready for dinner already? You're kind of fasting already, you know. Well, I know I look young, and I know we're having dinner, and I'll get you out of here pretty quickly, just about an hour, I think by 6 o'clock or so, because that's when my mom is coming to pick me up. And so today's talk is about becoming your own best doctor. Let's define doctor. What does doctor actually mean? Teacher. Well, today we have a lot of different types of doctors. We have philosophy doctors, we have juris doctors, we have doctors of chiropractic, doctors of medicine. We have doctors of osteopathy, doctors of physical therapy, doctors of education, doctors of nursing. What doctor means today is someone who has attained the highest level of education in their particular field. Even Oxford Dictionary defines a doctor as a learned person. But as this gentleman pointed out, originally though, the word doctor came from the Latin word docere. Docere meaning to teach or to instruct. And a Roman philosopher named Cicero, he started using the word docere as a way of thinking, a way of acting, to find the truth and to teach the truth. So in today's talk, I'm going to share with you a story that begins with someone in my life who was both a teacher and a learned person. Oh, I need this. There we go. Oh, and just as you see, you may notice some similarities between Dr. Lyle's teaching techniques. He has been training me. I'm his worst student, so technically that means I'm the best. And he said that if I train hard enough, I can go from being a starving artist like he was to a fasting artist. So this story begins with someone in my life who was both a teacher and a learned person. This is my grandmother, Rosa. So Grandma Rosa was born in the Soviet Union in the early 1930s, and she became a chemistry teacher. And despite her understanding of the laws of chemistry, the laws of physics, thermodynamics, she struggled with her weight quite a bit, even at the time in the Soviet Union where it was very difficult to get calories. And this struggle continued as she immigrated to America. in the 1970s. And she kept working as a chemistry teacher in Los Angeles. But as she gained more weight, she would develop more back pain, more joint pain. She just felt this general unease and fatigue. And maybe it was a Russian upbringing. She really didn't want to seek a doctor's help. She wanted to find out the solution on her own. She told me many times that she was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. So she went searching for answers at the local health food store. And she read everything she could on the shelves. Then she went in line at the bank and asked people in the line if they knew anything about health. Anywhere she went, she would ask people. Till one day, around late 50s, she came across a chiropractor who told her that she could help herself by fixing her posture, and he adjusted her. And her pain got so much better that she decided she wanted to become a chiropractor herself. So around late 50s, she decided to enroll in chiropractic college after being a chemistry teacher for over 32 years. In chiropractic school, she met a student who would bring this huge lunchbox filled with fruits and vegetables. And to her, that was foreign. So she would ask him, "What are you doing? Why aren't you eating like everybody else is?" And he said, "Well, I actually follow the principles of natural hygiene." And she said, "Well, what is this natural hygiene stuff?" And he explained to her, gave her some books to read. At that time, he gave her some audio tapes. And she was immediately curious. She wanted to make sure that she was getting the best information possible. So she started doing the same thing that he did, started eating lots of fruits and vegetables. And in just a short time, she had lost so much of her excess weight that she was starting to feel healthy again. Her pain went away, her joint pain went away. Turns out now she was primed and ready to teach the entire world, starting with her grandkids. The problem was her grandkids weren't ready. A common scene that took place in our house was when Grandma Rosa would come over to visit us, and we would have to hide all of our junk food. Even as kids, we knew she was on a different diet, a vegan diet. We would even repeat some of the phrases that she taught us. We'd repeat it at school to the teachers and the students. Things like, "Dairy is death." Or, "White flour is poison." But we would still eat it. And she would come visit. She was so horrified by the junk foods we would eat that if she saw it, she would throw it away. But it stuck with us, and it stuck with me in particular, because in my senior year of college, I learned that I had developed an autoimmune disease of the thyroid gland called Hashimoto's. And I'd also found out I had a lump in my neck. I was really scared. I had no idea what any of that meant. And all I remember was Grandma knew something about health, so maybe it's a good idea to go talk to her. So I went to her, explained her my situation, and she looked at me and she said, "So what? Your body can heal itself if you give it the proper conditions." So without a beat, I said, "Well, should I go see a doctor?" And she said, "Natanchik, your grandmother is a doctor. I can't heal you. The other doctor, he can't heal you. Only your body can heal you. So go see the doctor if you want, but it's not going to change the fact that you have to stop eating junk food." So I go see the doctor. Of course, he wants to do surgery, some combination of medications, and I go back to my grandma, and she says, "What did you expect?" So the doctor is trained in medicine and surgery. He's good at medicine and surgery. What else would he recommend, though? It still doesn't change the fact that you have to stop eating junk food. So I say, "Okay, I'll try it." Weeks go by. She's helping me change my diet. It's not as easy as it sounds, as we all know. And one day she tells me, "By the way, there's some crazy water fasting clinic in the San Francisco area. Call them. They may be able to help you as well." So as it turns out, this crazy water fasting clinic was True North Health Center, and Dr. Head Crazy was Dr. Goldhammer. And after a short stay there, it turns out my tumor shrinks, my autoimmune disease goes away, as evidenced by the blood work, and I see that not only was the other doctor wrong, but my grandma was right. She saved my life as I knew it. Dr. Rosa had taught me a very important lesson about health, which is the body can heal itself of almost anything if you give it the right conditions. Well, this was not an easy lesson to forget. And after a lot of thought over that summer, I decided I wanted to be like my grandma. I wanted to be like Dr. Rosa. So I signed up for chiropractic school, called Dr. Goldhammer and asked him if I could come and intern with him and learn what he knew. And for some reason, he agreed. A few weeks as an intern, and I'm seeing patients get healthy from all sorts of incurable diseases, things like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, autoimmune diseases like lupus. And all the while, I'm calling my grandmother almost every night and sharing with her some of the things that I'm seeing. And she's just delighted to say, see, the body is healing itself if you give it the right conditions. Here I was looking straight at the right conditions. So I was so excited to share what I'd learned. I couldn't wait to see my own patients in school. And when I got into the clinic, one of the first patients that I saw was a lady who walked in with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. And she walked in to see me, but she had been going there for acupuncture needling for about 3 or 4 years. She hadn't really improved that much, but she enjoyed the students and the doctors. In our first meeting, my job as a student doctor was to come up with a plan for her. And of course, I had to get the patient's permission, so the patient asked me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, we're going to design a plan, but I just want to let you know it's pretty extreme, it's pretty radical, but there's a good chance you can heal itself of almost anything if given the right conditions. I repeated my grandmother's words. And for some reason, she looked at me and said, okay, let's get started. What do we do? So then I repeated what I'd learned from my grandmother, what I'd learned at True North and what I'd learned from Dr. Goldhammer. Well, 3 weeks later, this lady comes back, and I'd given her a Excel spreadsheet, a printed out Excel spreadsheet for her to track her blood pressure, her blood sugar, her medications, and a few of her symptoms. 3 weeks later, her blood sugar had all but normalized, and her medical doctor had taken her off of the medications. Her blood sugar, she had been taking 32 units of insulin, had dropped to 20 units of insulin, and her medical doctor had taken her off of the oral hypoglycemic medications. And her reflux disease had gone away. She had been able to discontinue many of her medications. Well, I was excited. I'd just proven my grandma right, proven Dr. Goldhammer right, which Dr. Goldhammer absolutely loves. I couldn't wait to tell the other students what had happened. So they crowded around me as I reported to the supervising physician what had happened and how the patient was doing with documented results. And after the gasps died down and the disbelief died down, I sat there and I waited for one of them to ask me a question about what kind of food she was eating, what diet I had put her on. There was only one question, though. Wow, what needle points did you use last time? That's how I felt. I was in disbelief. So I called my grandma. I said, Grandma, the doctor didn't care the patient got better. The students didn't care the patient got better. Am I even in the right place? She said, Natanchik, did the patient get better? I said, yeah. She said, the patient cared. That's all you have to worry about. She said, keep doing it. So I kept studying at school to earn the doctor degree, and I kept interning at True North to learn how to get people well. And a short while later, I'd graduated, completed an internship, had been on staff at True North, and now was starting my own fasting center. I was excited because I was seeing my grandmother's words before my very eyes. The body was healing itself of almost anything with the right conditions. Well, now it's been a few years, and so I'd like to go over a little bit of some of what I've learned. But before that, I want to start with let's go back to the slides. So before that, I want to do a little audience exercise, which is, how did you find this information? So get comfortable, because we're going to just do a little stand-up or sit-down thing. If you learned about the benefits of a vegan diet in your school, please stand up. No? Nobody? Okay, if you learned about fasting from school, please stand up. Nobody, okay. All right, if you learned about a healthy diet, lifestyle, or fasting from your doctor, please stand up. Okay. If you learned about healthy diet, lifestyle, or fasting on your own search, please stand up. Congratulations, you are now doctors. You all have engaged in docere. Well, here are some remarkable stories of healing that I'd like to share with you that I've seen in my practice. Number one, heart disease is the #1 killer in the developed world. Oftentimes it comes without symptoms. The most significant predictor of all-cause mortality, meaning death from anything, is high blood pressure. And very often, the first symptom of high blood pressure is a stroke. The pressure in the arteries affects every single artery, not just the ones in the heart or the brain or the kidneys. Okay? But very often, if there's a blockage and it dislodges and blocks off certain areas, if it's in the brain, it's a stroke. If it's in the heart attack, it's a heart. If it's in the heart, it's a heart attack. If it's in the kidneys, it's in the kidney disease. It's kidney disease. Well, unfortunately, the only treatment in conventional therapy is just medications. And these medications are designed to somehow alter the numbers of the blood pressure. But as my grandma said, it doesn't change the fact that people need to stop eating junk food. Okay? Now, there are 5 stages of blood pressure. The first one is normal blood pressure. This is 90/60 to 120/80. And recently, even a blood pressure of 120/80 is now considered, maybe it's just starting to be a little too high. So 110/70 is now starting to be considered the better blood pressure as far as the highest range. If you manage to get a blood pressure over 120 at the top number, that is known as pre-hypertension. If your blood pressure goes from 130 to 139 or 80 to 89, one or the other, that is known as stage 1 high blood pressure. That's when your doctor may look at your numbers, if they are consistent, and say, gosh, you may need to watch your blood pressure. They may recommend a couple of things like, oh, eat less rich foods. Do a little bit of exercise. If you're smoking, start thinking about stopping smoking. Okay. Stage 2 high blood pressure is 140/90 to 180/120. Now, malignant hypertension is called a hypertensive crisis. This is how I learned in school that if a patient walks into your office and their blood pressure is 180/20 or more, you are legally required to call the ambulance to have them transported to the hospital so they can treat them immediately, because that means they can be stroking out at any minute. Okay. Well, my mentor, Dr. Goldhammer, in his 20s, he did have a beard and glasses, but he had a question. When he started his fasting clinic, he wanted to know, what is the formal effect of water fasting on high blood pressure? And at the time of the study, there was a few things known about how to lower blood pressure. The first one is if you reduce alcohol consumption from about a bottle of wine a week to about a glass of wine a week, you can reduce your blood pressure by about 5 points. Not too bad. If you exercise about 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, at a minimum, you could reduce your blood pressure by about 7 points on the top number. If you did drugs, or take medication rather, you could reduce your blood pressure by about 12 points. Now, if you just reduced your sodium intake to about 1/4 teaspoon a day, you could reduce your blood pressure by about 16 points. Now, Dr. John McDougall did a study of 11 days where he put people on a low-fat, plant-based vegan diet with exercise and meditation, and found that in just 11 days, they could have this similar effect of almost 17 points drop. Now, what Dr. Goldhammer did was he said, well, Dr. McDougall, I like your results, but let's see if we can do you one better. Let's put people on a water fast. And the range of fasting, depending on the person, was about 5 to 28 days. 4 weeks of no food, imagine that. Okay? So 5 to 28 days, on average, people fasted about 11 days. And 174 consecutive patients later, the net drop, the average drop for these patients was 37 points. More than triple the effect, as far as the systolic went, than conventional medications. It really showed what happens when you don't do one thing at a time. When you don't just remove the alcohol, or just reduce the salt, or just eat a healthy diet. So when you do everything all at once, we see a big result. Now, what's interesting is in this study, they also had different ranges for the different people in different stages. Now, you would have expected that someone in malignant hypertension or stage 2 hypertension wouldn't do quite as well as somebody who was just in pre-hypertension or stage 1 hypertension. That's not what they found. What they found was people who were the worst off actually did the best. So people in stage 3 or malignant hypertension actually had almost a 60-point drop in their blood pressure. And the people that were stage 1 also normalized their blood pressure, but they didn't have as long to go, suggesting the powerful effect of the water fasting and the diet afterwards. Now, the problem with high blood pressure today is because many people are walking around with pressure that's still too high, and it still affects their stroke risk and affects their organs and their arteries. However, the drugs come with serious risks and serious side effects. And these serious side effects are not worth it, according to the literature, until your blood pressure is sufficiently high. And that number is approximately 160 over 100. So if you have blood pressure that's below 160 over 100, but above 130 over 80, you still have significant risks and significant problems. You're just not sick enough to justify taking the drugs and taking the medical conventional treatment. So we can't simply rely on the medications. We have to take charge for ourselves. Here was a patient who walked in, it's a striking resemblance, but it's a patient who walked into to the Fasting Escape a few years ago. And I took her blood pressure, 192 over 114. Okay. Legally, I'm supposed to call the ambulance. So I asked her, I said, is everything, what did you do? She said, well, I'm coming here to heal myself, so I smoked and drank everything I possibly could. I figured you just clean me out. So, well, you can't fast right now. We got to get this normalized so you don't, so nothing happens to you while you're here. So I calmly took her blood pressure again. It was the same number. Wrote it down, said, okay, I'll see you at dinner, no problem, we'll just eat a few days. Then I calmly walked to my office and then frantically called Dr. Goldhammer. Dr. Goldhammer, what do I do? I got a patient here at 192 over 114. What should I know we're supposed to send an ambulance to her, but she told me, she said, I'm not going on an ambulance. That's what I came here for. He goes, well, feed her dinner, see what happens tomorrow. It's a good chance yesterday she was at 240 over 140. Okay, so I feed her the next day. Took her 3 or 4 days to get to the blood pressure low enough that she can fast safely. And 5 weeks later, she walks out of Fasting Escape at 103 over 80. Okay, after several weeks of fasting, several weeks of refeeding, now she was back to almost normal. This is the powerful effect of water fasting. Not everyone can water fast, though. Sometimes you get blood pressure like this. Somebody actually emailed me just back in January. So you can see the date on this blood pressure cuff. They sent me this and they said, what do I do? I can't fast. I just don't have the funds. I can't really do it. I can't really do any type of water fasting. So we got on the phone and discussed just a diet plan. And as you can see in the date here, now he's at 215 over 128. So after I told him that I'm legally supposed to send him to the ER, and he said the same thing, well, I'm not going to the ER. What are they going to do? They're not going to change my diet. So about a week later, he followed rigidly on the diet. A week later, gets to 150 over 97. Okay? What an interesting thing to celebrate achieving stage 2 hypertension. Okay. Okay. But he was happy, and so he just ate the diet. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to do radical things like fasting. Just changing your diet can be extremely helpful for improving your health. Okay, obesity and overweight. Obesity is defined as a BMI over 30. Okay, this is where somebody, for example, is 5'4" and they're carrying around 30 extra pounds. Okay, BMI is not the only way to measure this, but it's a good way to do it as far as literature goes. But the problem with obesity and being overweight is this is a human that has this very difficult time breaking the unhealthy cycle. Okay, and this is a consistent overeating of unhealthy foods. Now, I've had people ask me, well, isn't just consistent overeating in general? I've never met somebody who can consistently overeat broccoli, okay? It's very difficult to consistently overeat apples. You don't overeat 12 apples all in one sitting, okay? It's maybe possible under very interesting circumstances, but it's very difficult to do so, okay? And let's suppose you could do it, okay, and you ate 3 pounds of broccoli in one sitting. That's 300 calories, okay? If you filled your stomach that much with unhealthy foods, you're getting maybe 10 times the calories if you've got enough fatty foods in there, okay? What this is the unhealthy foods that are present in our environment. And when these unhealthy foods are present in our environment, we run the risk of getting addicted. And this addiction, Dr. Goldhamer and Dr. Lisle called the pleasure trap. So usually, when you gain that much weight, it comes with back pain, joint pain, like my grandmother had. It also can come with diabetes and heart disease and other conditions. And conventional treatment's very disappointing, actually. You know, it's a little bit of counseling, and really they don't understand this problem very well. But the next stage is after counseling is fail, then they say, well, let's take medications to suppress your appetite. If that doesn't work, we're going to chemically or physically alter your stomach somehow, irreversibly. So that if by chance the person's ever able to generate enough momentum to get on a healthy diet, if they physically alter their stomach by doing some sort of surgery, now they run into trouble long term. They can't eat as much food as they need to get enough nutrients. They have absorption problems, and they're psychologically just always sad about this. Okay. What we find is the foods that people tend to overeat on are the foods that other animals tend to overeat on. So if you feed rats things like SOS, you guys know what SOS stands for now, right? Salt, oil, and sugar. Okay? The rats get so large that they develop this compulsive eating and addiction-like reward dysfunction. And they get very large. They gain about 49% of their weight in just 60 days. If you take birds and you feed these foods along with processed meats, then they get so large, like this sausage-addicted kookaburra, they get too overweight, they can't fly. Okay? Well, if the kookaburra can't fly, they can't escape predators. Okay? If humans get too overweight, we can't be humans. Okay? We can't naturally be a happy, healthy human that we were designed to be. Now, nowadays, we have a lot of acronyms. I love them all. So SOS is salt, oil, and sugar. SOFAs is salt, oil, flour, alcohol, and sugar. SCOFAs is salt, coffee, oil, flour, alcohol, and sugar. And my favorite one is from Jeff Novick, which is CRAP, which is calorie, rich, and processed foods. Pick your acronym. They all make us overweight. They all make us sick. They all make us miserable. The average person can intake approximately 4 to 6 pounds of food daily. That's enough throughout the day to activate your stretch receptors to tell you you're full. And so the strategy for somebody who's overweight and obese is quite simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Okay? Shove yourself full of vegetables, fruits, and starches, things like potatoes, rice, and beans, but mostly vegetables and fruits. If you do that, you end up filling up your stomach with foods that have the fewest amount of calories and take up the most amount of room. If we do that, now you don't have to suffer like someone who's on another type of diet where they're not eating a lot of foods, but they're constantly hungry. And now they have to engage in overriding their normal natural hunger drive. Okay? Overriding your normal natural hunger drive is a recipe for disaster long term. Breaking the addictive cycle is part and parcel of what True North Health Center did, what I went there to find out about, and what we do at Fasting Escape. Okay, just taking a few days off of those foods is sometimes enough to break that cycle. Okay, it doesn't take too long. Resensitizing your taste buds is an amazing feeling to feel myself and also to watch other people. Someone might spend years trying to battle the pleasure trap, trying to not eat the foods. They wake up every day and they say, today I'm not going to eat the foods I'm not supposed to eat. And for years, they can't do it. One of the reasons it's hard to do is because if you're used to the rich foods, your taste buds are used to the rich foods. Healthy foods don't taste as good. Well, how the heck are you supposed to eat foods for the rest of your life that don't taste good? Now you're overriding the drive to the desire to eat healthy and tasty foods. And let's say you did what in the UK, in the zoo, what they did is they took 11 humans and locked them up in the zoo. And they took buckets of cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower and they put them in the cage there. They said, that's all you have to eat for the next few days. And after a week and a half, they're all grumpy and miserable as they're detoxing from their caffeine and withdrawing from all the other foods. But a couple weeks into it, now they're actually eating the food and enjoying it. Okay? So what we're seeing is breaking that cycle plus resensitizing your taste buds. If you did that and you force-fed yourself the healthy foods and you avoided the other food, the rich foods, it might take you as long as 1 to 3 months for your taste buds to get used to it. However, if you do a water fast and break that cycle, it can take as short as a week, sometimes 2 weeks, depending on how long you've been on these rich foods. So it really helps to short-circuit that process. And there's nothing like watching somebody who hasn't eaten for 3 weeks taste their first bite of food. In fact, that's why they say I'm such a good chef there. It's not, starve anybody for 3 weeks, anything you make is going to taste good, okay? So our strategy is to break that cycle, resensitize your taste buds, and don't leave room in your stomach for the rich foods, okay? Nobody's perfect. Yeah, sometimes things might sneak in there, but if you shove your stomach full of pounds of raw vegetables, salads, pounds of steamed vegetables, pounds of fruits and starches, things like beans, rice, and lentils, now you may not feel as hungry for the other stuff, okay? And when you do this, now you can reduce the pain and fatigue of your entire body. Okay, if you're in pain, it's hard to shop and shop. If you're in pain, it's hard to exercise the discipline you might need sometimes. If you're tired, it's hard to make the right decisions. Escaping the pleasure trap is like escaping prison. Now let's think about this. If you got into prison somehow, how would you break out? Well, one of my pastimes, I like watching those types of shows. Okay. So, the Escape Plan by Sylvester Stallone, where he spends, several months figuring out how to break out of prison. So what's he doing? He's watching all the guards, getting the routines down. And then when the time comes, everything has to be timed right. Okay, you got to time it right, do it right. And then even when you break out of prison, what do you have? The rest of your life, the guards are trying to get you back in. Okay, that's what the pleasure trap's doing. Once you break out, guards are trying to get you back in the trap. Okay? And they may come in very nice forms, like your friends. Oh, I made this just for you. Okay? And they're not doing it they're not doing it negatively. They're not trying to do this, but they're trying to be nice. Everybody's in the pleasure trap. So escaping the pleasure trap, people they underestimate this problem all the time. Okay? So we have to keep in mind that this is a lifelong journey that we always have to be focused on. If we lose our focus, we'll lose our way. Okay? And if we lose our focus, we'll get back in. And we just have to keep pushing forward because the pleasure trap is really the heart of this issue. Okay. Autoimmune diseases. This is where the body attacks healthy tissues, okay, for a number of reasons. Your gut is a long tube from one end to the other. And as your food passes through that tube, if any foods make it through the lining of the gut, then you can develop a syndrome called leaky gut syndrome, which can result in this autoimmune diseases. And it shows up in many different ways. Things like chronic inflammation, okay, flare-ups. Maybe you ate something, was exposed to a particular chemical, and you flared up. Now, it's poorly understood because it's relatively new, but it can come with a whole host of food sensitivities. And people can have joint pain, they can have cardiovascular issues, they can have all organ malfunction. And really, the only conventional approaches today is strong medications. Well, as I said in the intro, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is what I was diagnosed with. Okay, this is a thyroid disease. It's where the body attacks healthy tissues in the thyroid gland. And it can cause hypothyroidism. It can also cause the thyroid gland to react in negative ways. It can make the mood swings. It can cause sleeplessness, hair loss, cold hands and feet, similar symptoms of hypothyroidism. And I didn't know that those were the symptoms that I had until I got healthy and I realized, oh, this is what it feels like to be normal. Okay? It only took a few days for me. I was 20 years old when I started this whole thing. But I've met many patients, both at Fasting Escape and True North Health Center, who had Hashimoto's and were able to reverse it or improve their symptoms. This is not something that is a death sentence, and it's not something that will significantly affect the quality of life if we stop eating junk food. Okay? It turns out wheat, dairy products tend to exacerbate it the most. Rheumatoid arthritis, another devastating disease. Now, rheumatoid arthritis may be, in a positive way, it can motivate people to seek answers because they're in so much pain. And this rheumatoid arthritis is when the joints of the hands and the feet inflame. And it can cause, if it goes untreated, it can cause deformities. Well, fasting and a change of diet and lifestyle can affect this in such a great way that people can actually start to move their hands again and start. I had a lady who came in and she was sewing, and she said she had stopped sewing because she couldn't do it. Well, by the time she ended her 3-week water fast, she was now knitting a quilt and was incredibly happy that she could use her hands again. Okay. As it turns out, much of these autoimmune diseases can be from meat in the gut, okay, and dairy and soy. So we avoid these. We're just removing the cause of the problem. Polymyalgia rheumatica. Okay. So this was a patient of mine who walked into Fasting Escape. And he called me a couple years ago and he said, I wonder if you have room right now because I'm on an 18th floor of my apartment and I'm in such bad pain with my polymyalgia. Sorry, let me back up here. Polymyalgia, poly means multiple, myalgia means pain, multiple sources of pain in different joints. Okay? So he was in such bad pain in his joints, he couldn't walk him downstairs. And he said that the elevator was being fixed in his apartment complex, which meant that for the next 2 weeks, he couldn't use the elevator. So it was either stay in his place for 2 weeks and not be able to do anything, or just come and do a water fast. Well, I was kind of, I just started the Fasting Escape maybe a year before that, and I neglected to mention him that there's some stairs to get up to the rooms. So he walked in, he's all excited, and he looks at the stairs, and he said, I don't know, how am I going to do this? I said, well, luckily the rooms are fine. I can bring you up the food and the juice as needed. Let's see how you do. So I helped him up to the stairs. 4 or 5 days later, I walk down I go to the living room, and I'm just cleaning up a little bit, and I see him down there. He's watching a TV show in the living room. And I said, are you okay? How's your joints? He goes, I've been walking up and down the stairs all day today because I can't believe nothing hurts. Well, this gentleman fasted for another 2 weeks. And 2 years later, I followed up with him. We had lunch, and he said everything's still gone. He can walk again. And he's moved with his wife to a place where now they weren't limited by his disease. Psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. This is another type of autoimmune disease where the skin can present itself with silver scaly rashes. And if you also have arthritis in the joints, then they call it psoriatic arthritis. So this was a woman who came to my center. She called me because she was in a public profession that required her to shake hands with everybody she met. And she was embarrassed because this was her left hand. But her right hand was a little bit worse. And she was embarrassed because when she would shake hands, she would have to kind of pull away a little bit so people don't think that she's infecting. They didn't know what it was, so they thought maybe it was an infection or it was bleeding or whatnot. Well, this was day 1 as she walked in. This was day 9 of the water fast, and this was day 22. Okay, her right hand, this was the one that was a little bit worse. This is day 1, day 9 here, and day 22. She went back to normal, and she could shake hands again. Here was another lady who had psoriasis in her scalp. And of course, she said it actually was hidden very well, so she didn't feel too uncomfortable, but she wanted to go out with her husband and put up her hair sometimes, and she just felt like too embarrassed to do that. Well, luckily, she had been on a really healthy diet, which always helps the fast go well. And so this was day 1 when she walked in, and this was 6 days into the water fast. The body can heal itself if given the right conditions. Here's a young man who walked in my practice, did not want to do any fasting at all. He was just working too much. He had severe acne that had followed him his entire adult life. And he had been eating a standard, 19, 20-year-old guy diet, okay, which I think is slightly worse than the standard American diet. But not by much. So this was day 0. We took a picture. He had it all over his face, but for privacy, we just did the forehead. Day 15 on the diet. Day 20, by day 27, the only thing that were left were scars. And 6 months later, it was clear. Okay. Meniere's disease. Meniere's disease is a poorly understood autoimmune disease that apparently attacks the structures in the ear, resulting in dizziness and vertigo attacks at any given time. So rather than me explaining it, I'd like to have one of my patients explain it here in one of the videos that we had.
I've been having problems with Meniere's disease. So kind of a constant background dizziness, fullness in my bad ear that was variable, but it was always at least a minimum amount of fullness. So it's not something that ever went away, it just got worse sometimes. Tinnitus, a ringing of the ears, well, at least in that ear. Unpredictably, I would get spinning vertigo attacks that were very vicious. So, while the dizziness was unpleasant and made it hard for me to focus and concentrate, the spinning vertigo, basically it was game over, for at least the rest of the day. It'd be accompanied by vomiting, sweating, chills, that kind of stuff. It's pretty awful when that happened, and I could never predict when it would happen, so there was always this worry, okay, when is it going to happen? It's going to happen right in the middle of work. I got maybe a 10 to 15 minute warning, and it's something that I had to learn to recognize the symptoms. It just made it difficult to do things because you just never knew when that was going to. A whole host of medications, because it's such a, sort of disruptive disease, they kind of throw everything at it. I had tried a lot of different things, and I was getting a lot of help from the upper cervical adjustments and improving my eating habits, but I still had a lot of improvement, I think, that I could have gotten. So I read a lot about the fasting and consulted with you on it, obviously, and so decided to do a fast, and so I assumed that not eating, that things would go haywire. So I honestly was afraid of that a little bit, but I also knew that there was a chance that I could actually improve a lot. So that's what I said, I have to try this because anything's better than having Meniere symptoms. So I ended up doing a 10-day fast, and it's for a month, I think.
About a month. And how many of these vertigo attacks have you had?
I've had none. I've had no vertigo attacks since, which is great.
And how many of these medications are you taking?
Taking none of them. I'm off all the medications, and I'm having less problems than before when I was taking the medication. So it's the proverbial 4-point game. I sort of won, and the bad guy lost. It was very difficult for me to fall asleep. Self-professed night owl. So I go to sleep late, wake up late, not always very refreshed. And it's very unusual. Now I'm kind of a morning person. Now I sort of go to bed pretty early, between 9 and 10, wake up without an alarm clock between 5:30 and 6:30, and I wake up with a lot of energy. So one thing is, I think not having all those symptoms, which were really tiring me out, those are gone. But also, I think all the medications, particularly the Ativan, that would make you tired, and so my fast was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. It wasn't, it wasn't a cakewalk, it wasn't fun, but it wasn't nearly as difficult as I thought it would be. Particularly, with the advantage I got from that, how much better I feel. I almost feel like it was a little bit of a steal. I thought somehow I should have to pay worse. So the fast went extremely well. The supervision, you did a fantastic job. I'm incredibly grateful. The personal attention I got, your availability, which made it a lot more comfortable for me because it was a little bit nervous. I'd never done this before, and so knowing I could call you at any time and things like that, made me rest a lot easier. It's something I absolutely would recommend to anyone because it just seems so effective, and it's just really counterintuitive that doing less could accomplish more. That's something that I think a lot of people might have trouble wrapping their head around, but it's true. So I would say in a couple of weeks, it would have been 7 years, having, Meniere's disease that pretty strongly, impacted my life in a negative way. And, just by sheer stubbornness, I just sort of bowled through it. But, I was working on, half the number of cylinders, and, I'm a little bit concerned whether I'd be able to carry on my job, my normal life, and stuff like that. And, at one point I was just, okay, just let me make it through today. And now, I've been having no problems since the fast, and I've been as strong as I have been in 7 years, or probably more than that, to be honest. And so at some point I didn't think that was possible, ever. It wouldn't be possible ever again. I'm so much more stronger, I'm mentally more clear, and I'm back to exercising and things like that I haven't really been able to do. The outcome was so much more positive than I could have ever hoped for, when I was in the dark doldrums of Meniere's disease, that, I just really think people should get a little bit out of their comfort zone and try some of these things. Because, if you have half the result I've had, your life is going to be much improved.
Happy to report this patient is still doing well years later. All right, type 2 diabetes. The definition of diabetes is when blood sugar is improperly controlled. In type 1 diabetes, this is where the pancreas is not making enough insulin, and so as a result, the blood sugar is not properly controlled. However, in type 2 diabetes, the reason why the blood sugar is not being properly controlled is because the cells are clogged with fat, and so insulin cannot bring the glucose into the cells. This is called insulin resistance, and it usually comes with obesity. And if it happens long enough, the pancreas keeps trying to make insulin and insulin can't bring the glucose into the cells, then the pancreas stops producing insulin. This is where someone can convert from a type 2 diabetic to a type 1 diabetic, kind of known as type 1.5 or 1.5 diabetes. Unfortunately, the only conventional treatment besides counseling and diet modification is medications and eventually giving people insulin. Type 2 diabetes is a devastating disease because it results in long-term damage to the eyes, to the kidneys, to the nerves, to the point where people are getting blind, they have to be doing dialysis, and they're getting amputations in their feet and their extremities as things get infected and the nerves don't have enough blood flow. Now, here is a patient of mine who came to the Fasting Escape, and this is the end result. This is the end of her stay here. And she has quite an incredible story to share.
I completely followed the diet as well as the environment. I set all that up, I made it work for me, and then I followed it. I didn't budge, I didn't slip, and I actively chose not to. Because I knew how important this was. I knew I had been given this gift of a second life, and it was like, don't screw it up, Shelley. It's like, just don't. Said too much time and money and energy has been spent. Keep going. And so blood work was done like approximately 3 months after I got back. And the A1C that had been 14 was now 7. And I was like, that's 3 months of eating healthy with no meds. So that's what truly blew me away. My body shape, again, had continued to shift and change. It was very exciting buying new clothes, which I bought when I got back, and then I bought new clothes again around Thanksgiving, and then I bought new clothes again in the spring because literally my clothing size had gone from a woman's 2X, which is gigantor, down to this is a medium t-shirt I'm wearing.
The best thing in the world is to work with patients who are highly motivated and actually want to do this because it makes me look good, but they're actually doing the work and proving my grandma right every time. So the results with diabetes are so striking that when Dr. Goldhammer did a cost-benefit analysis study, he found that if people were actually do a True North style program, they could, before the program, they were spending almost $6,000 a year on their medications, on their health care. And after the program, they were able to cut that cost almost in half. So by any measurement, whether it's your health, whether it's your longevity, whether it's your symptoms, or it's your pocketbook, it makes sense to do a healthy diet and lifestyle. Now, lymphoma is a different story. Okay, lymphoma is a blood cancer of the white blood cells. Unknown cause is all they know is that it's not genetic. And conventional treatment has fairly good results, but it's radiation medication, so we all know how people feel when that happens. Well, at the True North Health Foundation, a patient came in, and they published a study. They published a case study on a lady who came in and did a 21-day water-only fast. Now, this lady had found tumors in her abdomen. Went to the doctor, they examined her, sent her out for a CT scan. They confirmed she had stage 3 lymphoma. She didn't have a lot of options. The doctor said, we really don't need to do treatment right now. We can only monitor you every 3 months, and then if it gets worse, then we'll do treatment. So she goes to True North Health Center, consults with Dr. Clapper, Dr. Goldhammer, does a 3-week water-only fast. They feel around, the tumors appear to have subsided. They send her back to do another CT scan. The CT scan shows the tumors have subsided substantially. They publish this in the British Medical Journal. And a 3-year follow-up revealed that the patient no longer had evidence of follicular lymphoma. The patient wrote up a little blurb about her experience here, and she said, "Life outside of True North is not an easy one. But what has helped me stay on track has been the will to live a long and a healthy life with my kids and husband." So we come back to my grandma Rosa. Speaking of will to live, because of her, I found out about this information. And because of her, many more people are alive and healthier today than they would have been. Now, unfortunately, early last year, she ended up in the hospital. Partly due to old age, partly because she had slipped quite a bit with her diet the past few years. She had developed one of the conditions I had listed here. And still, now it was time for her to come see me for advice. And I quietly asked her, "Grandma, do you think you should go see a doctor?" And I remember her eyes perked up and she smiled at me and she said, "No, Natanchik, the doctor can't heal me. Only I can heal me." So she did something she hadn't done in a while. She rolled up her shirt sleeves and got back to work. Every day after her hospital stay, she ate nothing except for the proper diet. She went walking every day, did some sort of exercise. In 1 month, her blood tests and her other numbers were starting to look much better. She was bragging to me how she was up to walking an hour a day with my grandfather at the local park. So she and I would talk by phone every few days, and she would share just how proud of herself she was for getting back on track. She told me she felt better, more alive, and more perked up than she had ever felt that she could remember the last few years. She had been a vegan for about 20 years at this point, and I realized she had not been suffering from a protein deficiency. She had been suffering from a pride deficiency. Pride. The only cure at this point was hard work, and she had found the cure yet again. In early December, she called me on a Saturday morning to say hello. We chatted for a bit. We remembered some stories that we shared of our different patients. I asked her how she'd been feeling, and she said she actually felt great. And she was brainstorming. She wanted to do a YouTube video with me sharing her new borscht recipe, a Russian soup. Except the past few days, something was a little off, so she was just fasting at this point, didn't feel like eating anything. But she's hopeful she'll be better by Monday, and then we can start on it. We exchanged I love yous, hung up, and that was our last conversation. She passed away the next morning. And every day I remember her lessons, that the body can heal itself of almost anything if given the proper conditions. Almost anything. But not death. But Dr. Rosa's final lesson to me was, even though you can't heal death, what we can do is live all the way up until we die. as Dr. Rosa did. So everyone in these examples that I've given you engaged in docere. They taught themselves. The person became the teacher. The patient became the doctor. The doctor's in all of us. The doctor's in all of you. Teaching ourselves what it is that we need to improve our own health. But we can't just stop there. We can't just stop there at learning it. We have to do it. Even if you start small, at least begin with a few healthy steps. These healthy steps are your medicine. They are the prescription for a healthy life. Now, until recently, these were the best kept secrets in healthcare. Your doctor, you couldn't find them in your doctor's office unless your doctor was like Dr. John McDougall, or Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, or Dr. Furman, or Dr. Goldhammer, or Dr. Clapper. Okay, these were not well known until recently. You could only find them on the shelves of the natural food store or in passing by someone at the local co-op or farmer's market, or as my grandma did it, in line at the bank. So here they are. Number one, eat some healthy food. Now, you may have heard of the people who say you have to eat one meal a day and that's the solution. I say, sure, how about we eat one healthy meal a day? Okay, as an electrical engineer, Ohm's law, spelled O-H-M, was a big part of it. So I figure OMAD is the new electrical engineering law. Okay? What a healthy meal a day means is maybe some salad, okay? Maybe a big plate of veggies or cooked veggies, some veggie soup, and then a plate of beans or rice or some sort of starch. Number two, oh, by the way, these are our ancestors back in the Stone Age, okay? And they're gathering food. They're gathering the tastiest berries out there, okay? So to some extent, we are designed by nature to eat the richest, tastiest food in our environment. And so our environment today contains lots of rich and tasty foods that are not necessarily good for our health. So we have to be very careful with how we structure our environment. Okay? Our instincts work perfectly for the right environment. So let's make our environment into your temple. Okay? Don't put junk foods in your house. Don't keep these foods around you, because if you do, now you're going to have to fight your instincts all the time. We know that the average American, 90% of calories from the average American comes from junk food, over 90%. Okay? Some of it comes from fruits and vegetables, but the majority of it is junk. Okay? The closer we can get to that green, the better off we're going to be. Now, I believe, just from seeing these patients and reading what I read, that if we get to about the 80% mark, we can do pretty well. Okay? If you get to A+, congratulations, that's very difficult to do. But that's when you can start to reverse disease. But why don't we start at 80% and go from there? Okay. We have to eat some healthy food if we're going to try to get healthy. And if we don't, here's what we have waiting for us at the other end, at the end of our lives. The last 10 years of life for people are incredibly difficult if they have these diseases. They're in and out of hospitals. They're spending their life savings, not having fun, not traveling. They're spending them on healthcare visits. And they're in pain and they're miserable. Okay? My grandmother got to live all the way up until she died, walking in the park with the love of her life, my grandfather. She did not have to spend more time in the hospital than she needed to. Number two, get a good night's sleep. Okay, a good night's sleep. In order to get a good night's sleep, you have to set things up like a chessboard. Okay? We have to be careful of the things that prevent good sleep. So things that have caffeine in them, things that will amp us up. Okay? Caffeine, for example, has a half-life in our bodies of about 6 hours. So if you have a cup of coffee at 7 a.m., by 7 p.m. you still might have about a quarter of caffeine left in your bloodstream. Okay? That may disrupt your sleep, both the quality and the quantity. So be careful. If you get good exercise, now you'll be physically tired enough that you fall asleep on time. And if you eat good, healthy foods, then that will help you get to sleep as well. Now, a newer invention, the mobile light bulb, is the mobile phone. So we want to be careful there. You know, sometimes they can aid us as tools, very brilliant tools that have been made today, but sometimes they can amp us up right before bed, so we want to be careful there. Number three, sleep in the time of our ancestors was as simple as partying over the campfire and then falling asleep. There was no extra sun. Okay, but today it's a little bit harder. Number 3, get some exercise. As it turns out, the best exercise is the one that you can do consistently. And you don't have to, if you're not used to exercising at all, or maybe you can't because you have a few injuries, you don't have to make a grand, big production out of it. Who here likes to dance? I say you dance in the living room for 15 minutes a day. Let's start there. Okay, and if it turns out now you can exercise a lot more, like Rip Esselstyn, there we go. Okay? But just keep in mind that if you think you're overdoing it with exercise, instead of sitting here 8 hours a day, that's overdoing it. Okay? Our ancestors, documented hunter-gatherer data shows that they could run up to 17 miles a day as they're searching for their food. So it's very difficult to overdo it on exercise. Number 4, fast when appropriate. As it turns out, most of the patients that I've dealt with have engaged in some sort of fasting. Fasting, the benefits are amazing. There are too many to count. Lowering blood pressure, decreasing insulin resistance, repairing the gut leakage that's going on, psychospiritual reasons, enhancing your immune system, normalizing your stress response, and my favorite, adapting the taste buds so that healthy food actually tastes good. This is why fasting is nature's balancing act. When you get too far out of balance, that you don't know how you're going to get back in, fasting may be the way to save your life and get you back into balance. So these are the foundations of good health. They're simple, but they're not easy to do. These will result in a healthy life. You can't predict exactly when you'll die, but what we can do is control how we live. My grandma, Dr. Rose's lessons, they live with anybody who has taken responsibility for their own health and has seen the impact of those health choices. Look around you. Everyone here is engaged in docere, just by coming to this conference, just by seeking your own truth and finding your own truth. So this is, in fact, how we take charge of your health and become your own best doctor.
Not hot? Oh, there you go. Okay, Doc, if you have any, we have some time for a couple of questions. Anyone out there? Yes, hold on. Be right with you. And we may have a couple of questions from our virtual audience as well.
Mark's getting his exercise. I like it.
That is. Who had a hand up? Yes, right here.
Thank you so much. It was so amazing. I'm really curious about, with autoimmune disease, you mentioned that, of course, there are more sensitivities to foods. After patients fast and they go back on eating healthy whole plant foods, do they still need to avoid things like wheat and soy, or do you see some people being able to eat those foods again?
I don't know if they can eat wheat and soy, or wheat in particular, because I don't recommend that they do it. Soy, though, it depends. I'm much more wary of processed soy products than I am of soybeans, for example. But what we do when we suspect a food sensitivity is the refeed is much more careful. So if it's, we'll actually refeed people slower, and we'll refeed them, we won't include a whole host of different fruits and vegetables. If they had those sensitivities before the fast, then when they're done fasting, I'll recommend that they stick on the really bland, clean diet for a few weeks, and then if they want to test certain things, then they can. And so that would include, say, someone wants to see if they can eat soybeans or edamame again, then they might just do nothing but edamame for 2 or 3 straight days, and then they can see if there's actually a flare-up or some sort of reaction there. So that would be the strategy that I'd use.
Okay. Got a question here? Yes, Joseph.
Doctor, this is my first convention, but I just want to say, I don't have a question. Your presentation was an eye-opener and absolutely amazing. So thank you for being here.
Yes. Here we go.
Do you have concern about people who are, I'll say, 70 or over? In other words, as we get older, I've fasted 5 water fasts in the last 2 years, 6. And the last 2, became problematic with electrolytes. By day 3, I was crashing.
Right. So this is why we take blood work before the fast and during the fast, is so we can see that problem occurring before it even occurs. So, and we also have to do a proper lead-in diet. So, yeah, this may be a concern with anybody, particularly elderly, just because your reserves are a little bit lower. But yeah, that's definitely a concern. That's why we don't recommend doing a water fast longer than 3 to 5 days, completely unsupervised with any blood work, with any vital signs taken throughout, because that is a problem. So.
Okay, we got a question from Joe Poultice over here. Joe?
Where's Mark?
How does your fasting clinic differ from True North?
Oh, True North is amazing. So they have medical doctors on staff. They have osteopaths, acupuncturists. I mean, they're so good though that they're like booked up till November, I hear. So. No, True North is just the size really is the biggest thing. So they have a whole host of staff support. Fasting Escape is much smaller. We're just a much more intimate experience. In fact, Dr. Lyle likes to joke around. He says that Fasting Escape is the introvert's paradise. So it's much quieter. We only, we don't have as many classes and as many lectures. We only have 4 bedrooms available for people. So we get booked up pretty quickly, but there's also much more room because we're not as well known and we're not as big. And Dr. Goldhammer, he'll send us his overflow if we need to, if they are booked and they have patients that need to fast right away. But the biggest difference is I'm a chiropractor, not a medical doctor. So someone's on lots of medications and their doctor isn't really supportive of helping them get off, then True North is the place to go, particularly because they have medical doctors who can help you phase off the medications while you're there staying and eating the food before you fast.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes. Mike.
Yes, my name is Mike Abdallah. I've never met you, sir, but you did a great job. I went to True North. I'm a product of Goldhammer, Clapper, as well as Sabatino. I lost 75 pounds. Everything that came out of your mouth is the truth. I'm a living example. And the situation is you've got to want to do it. I'm star of stage, screen, and I don't know if you saw What the Health, but Goldhammer called me up and said he's gotten a lot of calls, said that I was a paid actor. I didn't make enough money in the movie to buy Starbucks, but you did a great job, and everything you said was the truth. And here's me 75 pounds less.
That's the whole truth. That's the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
We got a virtual question from our live stream.
So someone asked a similar question about aging, but they were also asking if you have REM arthritis and on powerful medicine, what would it look like to do a water fast?
Yeah, so if you're on powerful medicines, that's a contradiction to do a water fast because you don't want to do water fasting on these types of serious medications. So the strategy is actually to adopt as clean of a diet as you can and see if that will allow you to reduce the pain enough that you can start to phase off the medications with your doctor's help. And then when you're able to phase off them, then you start the water fast. And so it's a lot of times when I'm talking to patients, we're trying to time it so that they may say, okay, well, I'm coming in 3 months, or I'd like to come in 3 months. That may give you enough time to phase off the medications so that when you arrive, then you can start fasting right away. Sometimes, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, sometimes that's not possible because the food is so addictive that they just can't do it. So in that case, we coach them, or they have to come in a place like True North or Fasting Escape. We just feed them the food so they can break that cycle, and then they go home and then they're able to tail off the medications on their own. So it's a big strategy. It's a little individualized, but that's how
okay, we got one more from our virtual audience.
Okay.
Yeah, so a coach, I believe she's a coach, she said she has a client who's fighting Lyme disease, food allergies, and mast cell activation syndrome. So no improvement with diet and tons of supplements with a functional doctor. And she's wondering if fasting if you think it would be effective for her.
Yeah, what other option do we have? You know what I mean? So if someone's already eating well, the chemical alterations of their system through medications or supplements or anything like that isn't working, then we see what can the body accomplish if we get out of its way. Okay, and that's where we try a water fast. I've had people come in with Lyme disease, excellent results with some of them, not so excellent with others. Nobody's gotten worse, but it's worth a try in my mind.
Last question over here.
Yeah.
You mentioned type 1.5 diabetes.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a type 2 that went uncontrolled and then becomes a type 1.
Yeah.
Can that be reversed?
In some cases, I have seen patients where their pancreas starts to produce insulin again, but it's rare. It's rare. That's where type 2 diabetes has gotten so out of control that the pancreas is starting to shut down. So, because of the things I saw at True North and the things I'm seeing now, I've stopped using the word impossible. So it's hard for me to say impossible, but it's much less likely.
We do have time for a couple more, and I got one here in the corner.
Okay.
You are?
Ashley Story. I'm a medical student. I was wondering what the effect of water fasting is on the gut microbiome.
Yeah, so it turns out when you fast the body, the gut inside is sterile. The gut essentially dies off, but then when you start to eat clean, healthy food again, it starts to recolonize in a good way. So that's why the refeeding is so important, but sometimes much more important than the fast itself. I've had patients who try to fast on their own, and they go to IHOP afterwards. They don't do quite so well, and so then we run into refeeding syndrome as well. So yeah, pretty important to do the refeed in the gut microbiome.
I got one more, and then a special surprise.
Okay.
Excellent. Erica from Loveland, Ohio. My question is about exercise during fasting or the refeeding or after. Like, where do you?
None during fasting.
Okay.
Yeah, fasting is defined as a period of complete abstinence from all food and drink in a period of complete rest. So yeah, it doubles the utilization of your electrolytes and calories, and so we don't want to redirect energy from healing towards the exercise. So we don't do any exercise.
Okay,
afterwards,
this next one is what I would call the proof in the healthy pudding, because here is none other than Shelley Watts that you just saw. Shelley?
Thank you. I just want to say this guy is a miracle worker. 65 pounds less, blood pressure normal, blood sugar normal, free of diabetes.
All right. Thank you all. Am I right? Is this the future of our health movement right here? We are. So thank you all very much. You can still purchase tickets for our conference, the raffle, the book sales. We're also going to be wandering around for our virtual audience. We're doing a special session of kind of wandering around, meeting some of the guests and introducing our virtual audience to the people that are here, some of the things we're doing at dinner. So it may be stop, you're on candid camera. We may get you, so be looking. Nathan, thank you so much. See you later, guys.